buffers, that kind of thing.
We begin today by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Woolstock. These territories are covered by treaties of peace and friendship of the Woolstock people, first signed with the British Crown in 1725. I now call our meeting to order. Attendance has been taken.
Yes.
Approval of the agenda. Say your name up, please.
Greg Erickson, and I'd like to speak on the motion.
On approval of the agenda.
It would just be to make the motion that he's on, Greg Erickson.
So the agenda I want to approve is one without the Regional Infrastructure Committee report attached.
We do that when we do the consent agenda.
No, I want to remove it from the deliberations today completely. So if we go back to staff to be re-edited.
Okay, so you want number E removed?
Correct.
Does all of this have to happen on the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so we need a seconder.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion?
On the question, the agenda I'd like to move is as presented with the exception of E Regional Infrastructure Committee report.
So is everyone in favor of that? You did ask why, and you can explain the reason why.
Through you, Madam Chair, Director Forsyth, there was errors within the just within the document itself. So staff will take it back, revise it, reach attempted that the next board. Okay.
Okay, so ready for the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Are there any conflicts of interest for disclosure this afternoon? No. We'll go down to number 5, consent agenda. A, approval of the minutes, May 6, 2025. B, Public Safety Committee report. C, Community Development Committee report. D, Economic Expansion Committee report. I need a motion to adopt consent agenda. Second by, any discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Move on now to number 6, the committee reports to Finance Committee, Director Corey and Mary Kane.
Okay. Make sure I'm putting no broccoli on my feet there, so before we start. Finance Committee met on May 26th. The meeting was called to order at 12:01. Mr. Langdon gave a presentation on the need for an updated operating and capital reserve fund policy. Staff have drafted the policy and are bringing this forward to the Finance Committee for information purposes only at this time. It is so important for the financial viability of the commission. It is recommended that both the Finance Committee and the board have appropriate time for reflection and input into the policy. Staff felt it was vital for the board to be aware of the information prior to budget deliberations, but it was unlikely that, but that ultimately policy could be adopted in the future after a 2026 budget is approved. Ms. Langdon presented this information and will present this information to you in this meeting. Ms. Langdon presented a proposed 2026 budget timeline, which includes 2 finance committee meetings, 2 committees of the whole meeting to begin in mid-August. The committee agreed with the proposed schedule and staff will undertake to have the meetings placed on the calendar. An observation was made as to the distribution of regional service support funding in 2025 as it pertains to planning and development services. Given that not all members received this service, as this item was not included in the agenda, it was decided it would be discussed at the next Finance Committee meeting. There being no further business, the meeting was adjourned at 12:41. I move the board receive the report of the Finance Committee dated June 3rd, 2025.
Any discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. This is where you want to put those.
So do that all over again.
So, yeah, well, that's, yes, Mary Kay will. I guess, Mary Kay, they're looking for you to give them some further explanation of all those.
Thank you, Director Corey. I'll give Kelly a moment to share the presentation on the screen. It's good to be with you all virtually. Looks like a nice lunch, and I like the background in the room. So I'm here to talk to you today about the operating and capital reserve fund policy. And why do we need an updated reserve fund policy? Well, it actually is really past due. Our last policy was updated in 2018, and a review was scheduled to take place in 2023. Obviously, with the timing and local government reform and all the changes that happened with the CRSC, it just was not possible to take place at that time. So we finally gotten around to it, and we want to start that process with you all. Our operations have changed significantly since 2018. We have 6 new service lines, and our costs have risen substantially. The effects of inflation, especially when it comes to capital costs in the solid waste facility, and this all needs to be factored into an updated policy. It also sets the stage for our 2026 budget. We need to consider these items in the budget for 2026 and the next several years so that we are adequately prepared when these costs arise. So the importance of reserves, and I can't overemphasize how important adequately funded reserve funds are. This is one of the most significant decisions that the board will make, and it will have a lasting impact on the commission for years to come. It supports the long-term planning and financial sustainability, and it allows us to maintain our strong financial position. Previous boards saw the importance of reserve funds, and that's why we're in the strong financial position that we find ourselves today. They also reduce the risk of service disruptions that have happened in the past and they will happen in the future. And it allows us to take quick action when they do come up. And we'll talk about examples of those as we get into the presentation. And then lastly, it's the key to stable and predictable fee structures, which is what everybody wants. Commission staff want it, the board wants that, and ultimately the taxpayer wants to see those stable and predictable fees. So a timing for the adoption of a new policy, we understand that it needs time and thoughtful evaluation because of the importance of these decisions. We're not looking to rush anything through. We want to have input from the Finance Committee, so we were able to give this presentation to them last week. They agreed that it was important for the board to see it at this time. And then we're going to take the time to hear what people have to say. And it allows us to prioritize careful evaluation before adopting a policy. The reason we wanted to bring this forward now is because it does impact the 2026 budget, which is upon us at this point. So the process that's ahead of us, what that looks like is we have provided a draft of a policy to the Finance Committee. They've agreed to forward it on to the board for information purposes only. We're going to take the time for review and to offer feedback. And then we're going to return to the policy discussion once the budget process is complete. So what we would love to see is an updated reserve fund policy by the end of 2025, but it's a ways out at this point in time. So we're going to take that time to make sure that we get it right. So our current policy was included in the board package, which you all should have had a chance to see. It met our past objectives, but it does fall short of what our future requirements are. It does not include the services that were added to the Commission's portfolio in 2023. It is insufficient given our current costs and our projected needs over the next 10 to 15 years. And it was very simple and concise. So what we're looking to do with our new policy is to build on the Commission's commitment to strong fiscal responsibility. It's guided by a comprehensive review of our capital assets to plan for our current and future needs. So that's been done. And it's going to be broader in scope, so much more comprehensive than what the old policy was. So as you're aware, there are 2 different types of reserve funds. The first reserve fund is an operating reserve fund. And what operating reserve funds are used for is to cover short-term fluctuations in revenue or unforeseen expenditures associated with the day-to-day operation of the Commission. And each service has to have its own separate reserve fund. So what that means is you don't use funds from local planning to pay for solid waste or vice versa. They're all self-sustaining, just like our budget. So each operating fund would now have its own operating reserve fund. So when developing what we would want to see as a target, we've used industry standards, which are between 5 and 15% of revenue. So you can see the different funds on the left-hand side. The percentage of revenue would be the target of what we're targeting to have in an operating reserve fund balance, and then what that amounts to in a dollar amount. So you can see cooperative and operating and regional planning services would be 37,000. So that would be our target. And what that amounts to, it really covers approximately 1 month's worth of expenditures for each of those funds. So if something were to arise, we would be able to take action, use reserve funds to be able to cover those unforeseen items that came up. We go to the next slide. This really tells the story of what our targets are based on where we currently are with regard to reserve funds. So we have already established reserve funds for all of the established services and 2 of the new mandated services because we had surpluses in previous years. We were able to start building these operating reserve funds. So you can see cooperative and regional planning is currently about 95% funded based on this target. Local planning services is at 82%. Solid waste services is 54%. And power generation is 45%. We currently do not have any operating reserves for tourism promotion, economic development, public safety committee, or sport, recreation, and cultural infrastructure. We do have fully funded reserves for community development as well as regional transportation services. So we are in a good position when it comes to this. We're just looking to build on that even further to establish those funds that have not previously been in existence. The second type of reserve fund is a capital reserve fund. And capital reserve funds are only used for long-term capital expenditures. So that would be the purchasing of capital assets, the construction of buildings or infrastructure. Any item that's capital in nature can be used, a capital reserve fund can be used to fund those. And they are very critical, especially when you come to very capital intensive divisions like the solid waste facility. So not all of our services require capital reserve funds because they're service-based and they don't have capital requirements. So we only need capital reserve funds for local planning services, solid waste services, and then the power generation facility. So you can see the target for local planning services is relatively small at 15,000. The capital requirements in this service are basically computers and desks. Solid waste services, the target is 9.6 million because it is so very capital intensive. And we're going to take a deeper look into why that number was chosen in the subsequent slides. And then power generation facility, a target of $1.5 million was chosen. And we chose $1.5 million because when we refit our engines about every 10 years, it's about $750,000 to refit one engine. So if we had 1.5 million, we could refit both of those engines without having to go to the Municipal Capital Borrowing Board and borrow, which is what we've had to do in the past. So this would allow us some flexibility as well as some savings with regard to interest. On the next slide, you'll see where we currently are with regard to our capital reserve funds based on our proposed target. So local planning services, we're about 56% funded. For solid waste services, we're at 38%. So there's currently 3.6 million in our solid waste services capital reserve fund. In our 2025 budget, we had budgeted $625,000 to be put into the capital reserve fund by the end of the year. So if all goes according to plan, by the end of 2025, we should have at least $4.2 million in that reserve fund. And then for power generation, we are about 59% funded. Again, 2025's budget had a significant amount going into that reserve fund. So we'll be getting close to fully funded status if all goes according to budget by the end of 2025. So let's talk about solid waste services a little bit more. because we do know that $9.6 million is a significant goal. So there's three reasons why we need to have money in that solid waste capital reserve fund. The first is it needs to cover critical infrastructure for when failures happen. So I'll give you a real life example of our leachate system. In 2012, we had a failure in our leachate system, which meant we couldn't pump leachate off of the facility. When you can't pump leachate, you have to put it somewhere. So what that meant is we had to truck leachate off of the solid waste facility or the landfill daily. And it's about at that time, it was about $10,000 per day to truck leachate off of the landfill. So if we did not have reserve funds to be able to repair that leachate system in a timely manner, you're looking at $10,000 per day. If we had to go and borrow to repair that infrastructure, it's about a 2-month process to get approval from the Municipal Capital Borrowing Board before you can even begin fixing the infrastructure. So you're looking at 2 months worth of trucking leachate off the facility before you even begin. So it's about 6 months out before you could even have a fully working leachate system. That's a significant cost. So it's very important to have those reserve funds available so you can take quick action when failures occur. It minimizes both our environmental risk as well as the financial impacts on the commission. So the other thing that we need to consider is our future cell development costs. Excuse me. We are currently in a very good financial position when it comes to cell construction because of the approval of our EIA. So our current cell construction piggybacks on our existing cells with an estimated cost of about $250,000 per cell. So that's a relatively low cost to develop a cell because all the infrastructure is below in cells that have already been constructed. Once we reach our final elevation and we have to move to developing cells at different areas of the landfill, our estimated cost per cell is between $1.2 million and $3 million, depending on the excavation that is required. So it's a significant increase over what we're currently spending. And that's estimated to take place in the early 2030s. So we need to be in a position to be able to fund those cell development costs at a total cost of about $10 million over a 10-year period. And one of the major reasons that we do have the solid waste capital reserve fund balance that we do have is we were preparing for these high cost cells before the EIA was approved in 2021. This just allowed us a little bit more time because our costs to develop these cells and go higher is much cheaper for the next 5 to 6 years. And then lastly, which I'm sure you probably would have seen in your tour today, is there are facility upgrades that are required. So we're a 40-year-old industrial facility. There's significant capital requirements that are going to be needed over the next 5 to 10 years, and we need to be in a position to be able to fund those. So this is a picture of where the landfill assets are in their useful life cycle. So Brett undertook a complete review of our capital asset condition and the estimated replacement of these assets through to the end of the estimated useful life of the landfill, which is approximately 2056 at this point in time. So you can see from this picture, the graph, that about 28% of our capital assets are less than 20% of their useful life. 16% are between 20 and 40, 17% are between 40 and 60, and then we're getting to the older assets. So between 60 and 80%, about 21% of those assets are in that estimated useful life. And those really consist of our infrastructure. So our buildings, like our admin building, our baler building, the baler as well. So those are critical pieces of infrastructure that are starting to reach the end of their estimated life. And they're at a significant cost when we have to refurbish or replace them. Then we have about 18% that are over 80%, some are over 100%. So about 18% are in that 80 or over as it pertains to their useful life. So we really can't consider a reserve fund policy without factoring in our borrowing. Traditionally, we have financed equipment purchases that are over $100,000. Anything that was under $100,000, that was paid for through operations or the tipping fee. However, in the early 2030s, we know that we're not going to have the capacity to borrow for 100% of our infrastructure upgrades and maintain that debt service ratio of less than 15%, which is in our debt management policy. So we need to come up with a plan to be able to fund these capital requirements. So how are we going to do it? So we know in 2031 approximately, there's about $12.1 million of capital costs that are coming. That includes equipment replacement as well as a baling facility. So we need to be in a position to fund approximately 50% of these costs, or about $6 million, in order to maintain that debt service ratio. So there's really two options of how we come up with that $6 million. The first is we could pay for it through tipping fees. So what that means in 2031, we have to come up with $6 million. So the tipping fee would have to go up $70 per ton in order to pay for it. Or we can start putting the money away now and raising the tipping fee incrementally and putting it into a reserve fund. So the time comes in 2031, we have that $6 million sitting there to be able to fund 50% of that $12 million capital cost. Those are really your only two options when it comes to that. So it's incremental or it's all at once. So what does this all mean? We really have a 5-year window of lower cell costs, that $250,000 per cell, which provides us time to plan for those future cost spikes and put the money away now to save for the future. Strategic preparation today promotes stable and predictable fees in the future. It reduces the likelihood of steep future tipping fee hikes and ultimately taxpayer dissatisfaction. But we need to start preparing now, which means the 2026 budget. So for a funding timeline, I just want to reiterate our financial position is strong. We do have current reserve balances, which are a great starting point from which we can build on, and our need is not immediate, so we're planning for the future. Ultimately, a goal that we have is to have fully funded reserve funds by the end of 2030, which would put us in a solid financial position with regard to the replacement and the costs that we know are coming in the 2030s. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any comments that you may have at this time. I do want to reiterate that we will have lots of time for input before this is ultimately put up for adoption.
Thank you. And we'll start at the end of the table, and Director Mallory, we'll start with you and go around and get any questions. No?
And, you know, put away what, $250,000 a year over the next 5 years for capital costs?
Sorry, I missed the number that you said, Director Morrison.
But $250,000.
$250,000?
Yeah.
For the solid waste, which fund are we talking about?
For the reserve over the next 5 years, we're gonna need about 1.2 million. By 2030, we'd have to put away an additional about $250,000 a year. Is that correct?
I think we probably should go over the numbers a little bit more. Each fund would have its own requirement. If we're talking about the capital reserve fund, we've got about $5 million that we need to make up over the 5-year period.
A lot more than nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mary Kay, for the presentation today. And I guess thank you to the commission staff for providing the runway required to give this all the airtime it needs. I think it's a great extension of the kind of fiscal prudence that we operate the commission with. So it's entirely reasonable, to adopt this program moving forward. I do not have a great idea of how we're gonna populate those fund and over what time period. Of course, it'd be great if we could populate the funds out of nothing but surpluses from continued operations, but I guess that's a little too optimistic. But I do have a question about how the money's handled once it's in the reserve funds. Could you talk a little bit about the cash handling policy and how that's reinvested to create value?
Yeah, so we currently segregate all of our reserve funds, so each one has its own fund. We also invest them, so we've been pretty conservative when it comes to the investments. We've stuck with, say, GIC investments. That's something that we are going to look at in the future as our balances grow, though. Having an investment policy statement with regard to reserve funds, while maintaining, we don't want to get too risky, obviously. So, but right now they're invested in GICs.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
So we heard today that in the last 10 years, the amount of guards have doubled. And so would it be fair to say that the revenue doubled as well in the last 10 years or thereabouts proportionally? And was that taken into consideration when you come up with the calculation of what's required in the next 10 years or 5 years, I guess, 2030?
So we do track tonnage. So we have a historical estimate of where it's come from and where it's gone. In the last 5 years alone, it's grown significantly. So yes, that's all been factored in. 2025 so far, it's kind of leveled off. So we're not seeing that incremental growth that we've seen in the last few years. So we've based it on what we're seeing in 2024 as well as 2025. So we've used a historical average.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes.
Good. Great presentation. Good, thank you.
One thing I'm worried about, the tipping fees go too high and then the landfill will be the ditches and the woods and everything else, so we have to be careful about that too, so. Yeah. We're still gonna pay.
Okay, next.
Yeah, my only comment is I'd like to see it done incrementally. I stated that even at the finance committee, rather than to have to raise tipping fees dramatically in 2030 or whatever. You have to do to get these reserves, so if we do this incrementally, I think it's easier on our contributors to do that. Should we hold the line on that? Yes, we may have to increase the tipping fee slightly each year, but it's better than going from $104 to $170 in a short period of times. I just want to give my input on what will be, I guess, one of the options for that case. So, and I do agree, we need reserves. They need to be higher than what they are. Thank you.
Yes.
I just, one point, rather at our last budget meeting, we said when our tipping fees are going down. I think I said that it's a lot easier to keep it the same and build it a little bit than get slammed with it 2 years later, it's gonna be crazy. I think I did say that last budget meeting.
Yeah, that only makes sense.
Actually, the only question I had was, I understand there's been considerable growth, not only in the tipping fees, but in the population. Has any of that been equated into that as well, or would be increased demand on these services that might adjust that reserve requirement as well?
So what we've looked at is historically the tipping fee grows. So as the population grows, the tipping fee would grow as well. So I think that would take into consideration with the population. So we're looking at tonnage as opposed to population.
But not exclusively with regards to solid waste though,
Okay.
with the other reserve funds as well.
Yeah, so what we've looked at with regard to the other reserve funds is their budgets. So it's based on a percentage of their budget so that we would have adequate money tucked away should something occur for about 1 month worth of expenses.
Yes.
No questions, I guess, right now, John. I'll have ample opportunity.
And I have nothing.
That's everyone around the table. Well, thank you very much, Mary Kay, for coming on board and doing the presentation, and also Director Corey for doing his feedback and his motion. Thank you. We have
Thank
a
you.
lot to take in the next few months. Thank you. Okay. So we'll move on to number 7, staff reports, community promotional funding program. decision-making model. John, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you recall, or I hope all the directors recall, at the meeting on May 6, 2025, the board directed myself and staff to come back with a proposed criteria in the decision-making model for approved funding for the Department of Health. This is the Community Promotional Funding Program, or the Community Funding Promotional Program. And this was the program that started in 2023. It was 100,000 for the first year, 50,000 for each subsequent years, for up to 4 years. So it's a 5-year pilot to help communities promote within the region, promote themselves. Actions to date is at the first go around, the board had decided to split the funding between 2 communities, the 2 community groups that were existing at the time. One in the capital city of Fredericton and one in the town of Oromocto. Since that time, more groups are coming on board, more requests that they communities to help sponsor some funding, to help sponsor some events in their communities. Some communities are being very proactive. There's a new committee recently struck in the municipality of Arcadia. We also have another group that may be emanating out of quite possibly out of Maryland and some other areas, looking at trying to do physician, nurse practitioner, healthcare recruitment. So what we looked at this year was how do we go about distributing these funds? Well, there's criteria around these funds, and you can see in the report. The funds must be used for activities aligned with the Department of Health's objectives in our agreement, which includes community marketing and promotions targeting to healthcare professionals, community welcome and settlement supports, recruitment, event participation or hosting, physician engagement and retention efforts, and healthcare workforce asset mapping and planning. And we've done the asset mapping. It's now available on our website. Everyone can see. We went around the region. It's been just recently put up. We talked about that at a joint community development and economic expansion. So the evaluation criteria is also included within the report, and they're described more fully in Appendix A, but I'll get to that in a moment. So strategic alignment with the physician recruitment retention objectives, local capacity and readiness to implement, collaboration with other stakeholders, example, regional health authorities, municipal councils, innovation, sustainability, and replicability of the proposed approach, budget clarity and fiscal responsibility, and measures and outcomes evaluation plan. And how we plan on looking at that, or what we would suggest, is that there be a committee formed internally with your senior staff, and we would use a weighted scoring or criteria, if you will, in terms of that. So strategic alignment, 20% and 20%, readiness and capacity, collaboration, innovation, sustainability, budget soundness, evaluation, reporting. And so we do require reports back. Every year we have to report back on this funding to the Department of Health, and we do so in a timely fashion. I want to say that on things such as collaboration, we've been now that we've been at this couple of years, there's been some opportunities for the Fredericton and Oromocto groups to participate in some joint initiatives and events. We did have one coming up. Sharp was on the call with us recently on, in terms of bringing the groups together and welcoming his group into the groups that we're meeting with. And we don't just limit it to those groups, but we also invite other stakeholders that are very important to this, the Brunswick Medical Society, the Ignite, Regional Horizon Health, Dr. Comstock, her team. We invite lots of folks to these meetings. So we wanted to make sure that Director Sharp and his team had an opportunity to have a conversation with us. But there have been some real clear examples of where there have been wins. And we've been doing well with this, but now we believe it's time that we broaden that so that if people have, or the communities have an opportunity or have an event, that there should be some seed funding there. Or if there's seed funding left, that will be prudent and fiscally responsible with that. So, in terms of that, as we said, it's also recommended that successful applicants be expected to provide quarterly reports to the commission that outlines the activities undertaken, expenditures and measurable outcomes consistent with their reporting obligations to the department. These are not onerous. They're asked everyone maybe turn over in their package if they have it in front of them and look, you can see what the application process looks like. Very, very generic, pretty easy to fill out. The applicant information, the committee overview, you know, these are like 250 words. We're not looking for an essay. The proposed initiative. So if you're going to a resident recruitment event, put that down. That's what the event is. That's what the purpose is intended. The budget summary, what are you gonna do with funding? Community partnerships, evaluation plan, just a declaration that they certify that the information provided is accurate, accountable. So, within that, Madam Chair, there's a recommendation, there are options. The board may approve the criteria detailed above, or the provide staff with an alternate direction. And the recommendation is option one, recommended, you know, option one is recommended and can be accomplished by passing the following motion. That I would, you know, I move that the board approve, and I'll need a director to make that motion, if so.
Does someone around the table would like to make that motion?
So move.
Hey, do you want to read it, please?
I'm not, sorry. Move that the board approve the evaluation criteria listed above as the basis for award of position improvement grant program funding. Is eligible community-based committees as outlined in this report.
Got a seconder?
David, one of the Davids. David Goliath.
Is there any discussion? Yes.
On the issues of sustainability and innovation, and the other word that I like to think about in there is dependency. With any funding model that regularly gives out funding, there's a danger that dependency gets developed, and redundancy is a really big issue. We have a lot of organizations doing a lot of things in the Brunswick about healthcare. And it's easy for many of us to think that we might be able to do a better job than the other folks that are already doing that job. So my concern would be in that definition, it needs to be defined to avoid paying salaries, paying for positions, and that would create redundancy. Sending someone to a recruitment effort, I think, great, you know. But that's, and we're seeing a lot of that in the province right now, where the province is cutting back because they have ended up paying for positions, not actually. And then I think if some wording in innovation and sustainability would strengthen that. Just to mention.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the member, I think, Director Corey, in terms of that, and looking at innovations, and stability, in terms of down the road, I think that we be very diligent, and also looking at that everywhere, to looking at things that would consistently duplicate themselves. That would be one of the things that we would not want to do. One, if there's a recruitment event, I'll use the Oromocto committee, for example. They have a good program where they send a limited amount of people. They go out, they meet with recruits, they try to bring them back, they invite them to the community, and they do some touring around. Those are things that, yes, we could look at year over year because they bear fruit, which they have already. But some of them, you know, some may not bear any fruit. But certainly, if you want to, Madam Chair, a motion is made to deepen that, we could do it, wordsmith it, or you could maybe just direct staff to add that into criteria.
How would you like that done?
Yeah, it's. I'm okay with it the way it is, because the way I understand it, but it's not clear. Need that, on the sustainability side of things, Oh, what are you gonna look at? So if you keep sending those same people out 8 years in a row. That's not a good thing. In my opinion.
Yes.
Madam Chair, through you, Director Corey, I agree. But I agree if it's not bearing any fruit. If you're sending people to, there's only a limited amount of position events each year. If we do send people to them and we're attracting, the town of the Moramaka Hospital or through Horizon Health, just recently attracted 3 doctors. 2 net new and 1 to replace, and those were all in primary care. I think proof is in the pudding, so to speak. I don't mean that, if for lack of better wording, that they've been able to do that. I think if we did this 3 more, another year or 2, and there was no movement, I don't think we could.
Does that,
No motion.
no motion for you? Does that answer your question? How,
So I'm not gonna make a motion to change the vote.
oh, you're not gonna make a motion,
No.
change motion, okay, the second, yes, Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Smith, for bringing this forward. Absolutely in approval of moving forward as suggested. With a couple caveats. One, I presume this is going to get turned into a policy and brought back to the board. It's going to be more formalized than just the form that's in front of us now, and that would allow for opportunities to wordsmith some language and so on and so forth moving forward. And it would also allow for the opportunity to add the economic development coordinator to the evaluation committee, because a lot of the challenges faced by new physicians are the ones that they meet while they're setting up the business practice that is their medical practice. And I think having input from both of those standing committees through those roles would be great. And you may not need the COO there, if we have an extra staff person on board. Anyway, happy to support the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Director Martin?
As far as going the same place all the time, the doctors are moving like every event with new doctors, because the 3rd years have become doctors. Now you got 2nd and 3rd year going in, so you gotta still talking, but you still gotta go to that recruitment session every year. What? Talk to the doctor. Because every year there's new ones. Well, there's a graduate.
It's just, I'm thinking maybe I'm reading this wrong, but I'm thinking if we were to get a doctor in our area, fulfill our mandate to have somebody there, then I'm not too worried about funding next year, because somebody else can try to fill their place. But if we keep giving the money to people that keep getting the doctors, we're not sharing the doctors, then I see a problem. Makes sense.
Okay, is there any more questions, comments?
Well, one thing about the doctors, is their choice where they want to go to, so that's, I mean, so if they like a rural, we didn't go, right? Yeah, but if they like
I guess I can't fill my slot, because they're always going to Ormont or Harvard. Then I need funding to keep practice up, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
yeah, you get your share of money.
Okay,
Well,
sorry,
I wonder, like, the funding that, what we did last year, I watched those great videos about doctors and being in Fredericton and how they support each other, and it was great done by Ignite, whatever. Didn't really do a whole bunch for the rural, area, and the CRSC, as I amended it, is for the entire area. And so that choice of being able, what you're saying is their choice, but if they're being led down the garden path to one spot, it's not necessarily equal opportunity at the table. So I wouldn't be happy that the funding that I'm approving is going to solicit to one location or 2. So that's just my opinion.
so with this, if we fill out the application, right, and there's certain criteria there, so it does not mean it's gonna go to the same people all the time. Anybody that has the committee on board, they can certainly apply. And Director Collins, do you want to take?
Well, I was just gonna say, it would be up to you to test something, right? I mean, that's our job too, we can.
I have no money.
But that's what you go to the board for, to get your share, or.
Oh, okay, so that's new plan, last year's plan was,
That's correct. It was like two areas.
Right. No,
And that's why.
That's why it's changing now.
I get it.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so if nothing further. So you want to put the motion on the floor?
Yeah, we already
Do we
did.
have second?
One
Okay.
day.
No further discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Now we'll go on to the last one. Video report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll go down through this relatively quickly, I hope, anyway. Every year we have a summer forum. And this year we thought we'd get away without it, but there's a lot on the plate, a lot on the go right now. And when we talk internally, we felt this is something that's necessary. It'll be a Friday morning, kind of the same format as we've used in the past. We'll have some detail out around that. This year though, the date, I'll be honest with you, at this point, might be a little bit fluid. I've been in touch with Premier Holt's office. The chair and I were in meetings in April. And we had an opportunity to meet the Premier and the Minister briefly as part of a larger group. But one of the things that the Premier was very interested in was, let's not have just a meeting with her and the Minister, let's bring in the regional caucus. Let's have a conversation. So we're working on the details of that now, and I actually have a meeting, oddly enough, scheduled for later this afternoon. So I'll have that conversation and we'll keep you posted on this, but that'll certainly be part of the flagship of the meeting. And it will be to have the Minister, the Premier, and the regional caucus. Chair, Director Powell.
Oh, sorry.
I have a question. Does it always have to be on the Friday?
No, but it seems to get everyone there.
I see on the Friday in July,
I
I
know.
mean, it's a long, people usually take it off to have a long weekend, right?
Yes.
And then we're stuck here on Friday morning in July.
Well,
Can it be at the Thursday?
Director Powell, I'll tell you what, I'll do everything I can to see when the Premier is available, and I think that will kind of, I think might dictate some of
She
that.
might smile holiday too.
No, hey, listen, if she does, I'll say,
Tell her I'm
Director
right.
Powell, God, you seconded that motion.
Yeah.
Next thing is on this, is on the aquatic center. As everyone knows, we are obligated, through a motion of the board, and that we entered into contractual agreements that, we're continuing with the architectural design phase, and the architectural design, team has completed a submission of Class B construction cost estimate, and that was shared with the steering committee, I think about a week and a half ago, right, about that. And we're currently, pre-tax and, not indicative of tariffs. We're at the construction cost of roughly 81.3 million. So we've gone from our last one, 74.2, and now we're at 81.3 or 81.3. So just wanted to keep people abreast of that. If you need any further details, reach out, and certainly Brett and I can help you on any of that. Our space, well, the space is we now on a transition. I think I should have taken off the word successfully on there, because we're still under construction. There's still some wires hanging here and there, and some plugs that need to be installed. But it is a beautiful space. We're in the final throes of it right now. I'm meeting with John Bigger, who's been acting as our agent all through this, tomorrow. John's back in town. We're gonna have a quick meeting at the office to try to finalize everything we need. It's really just trim and cleaning and things like that we need right now. But anyway, we want to get it done up so that we can showcase it to the board proper manner, and something that you'll be proud of as well. So we do plan on hosting an open house with yourselves, councils, stakeholders, at some point in the future, maybe early fall. Originally, we were looking at June, but I just don't see that happening right now. So.
It is a beautiful spot.
And it's gonna be on a Thursday.
I'm gonna try everything on Thursday. It's a required time limit, Director Val. Monday.
Well, yeah.
Well, no, then they're coming back from the long weekend. I just think.
We did another day.
Here's how much quickly.
Okay. Director.
So next, just, wanted to, let you know that the University of Moncton has reached out to us. They've been, they've received a grant, from the Department of Local Government to conduct a comparative study of regional service commissions. And this initiative aims to evaluate performance, governance, and service delivery across RSCs with a view to strengthening the model. And the board members who are interested in participating in this study are encouraged to reach out to me directly. They would like to talk to our senior staff. They'd like to talk to communities. Actually, some communities had heard about it and have already reached out and said we'd like to participate. It's about an hour. It's about a 60-minute to a 2-hour time commitment in terms of who you'd like to speak with. So if it's whether it's your clerk, your CAO, a combination, maybe it's the mayor and council, it all depends on who it is. I would encourage you, I think we have to encourage our young people. I have 2 daughters that are one entering graduate studies and one into the PhD realm. I have to be supportive of our educational institutions and supporting them with their studies. And I think it'd be important that we offer, not everybody, you don't have to participate, you don't have to answer every question. It's really just looking at how we look, and they're looking to start, they've asked for the big three to participate. So Southeast Capital Fund, and the other two have said yes, just so that, so it'd be good if we can participate. So anyway, they'll call, set a time, do the interview and make it hopefully as painless as possible. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you could, I would appreciate if you could send me some feedback by the end of the week. Just saying that, we'd be willing to participate, because we only have about 30-40%, and it's really not worth their time to pursue. But if there's staff or resources available, it'd be great. Key dates on the budget, 2026. So just so that you know, we're firing up the jets, and Mary Kay and the team are working very hard on this, along with everybody and all the managers. And so the dates, again, just to reiterate, we're taking it off on August 14th, Finance Committee. August 21st, Finance Committee if required. August 28th, Committee of the Whole. September 4th, Committee of the Whole. September 11th, present to the board. September 15th, presentation to the CAOs. September 20th, amendments are due. October 27th is the earliest budget, earliest of the budget it can be voted on. And November 1st is the ideal budget deadline. And so we're really hoping that this new process, which was directed and approved by the board, will help us hopefully avoid last minute amendments, last minute confusion, underestimation, that type of thing of the time. Director Henderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would it be possible to have a pre-consultation for the CAOs if the August 21st Finance Committee meeting is not required? I think it would be valuable if we could get some input from them before budget's baked. And I think it'll be pretty baked by the time it gets to September 15th.
Well, Director, sorry, Madam Chair, Director Erickson. Director Erickson, there's a few things that are conflicting on that. First off, the CAOs, all of these are broadcast. All these meetings are broadcast. The documents are all shared with every community. It is as transparent as can be. They should be receiving the documents from the directors at the table, and in terms of that. For those who want input, some don't share that same desire. Within that, at the July 2024 forum last July, the board instructed me, and that was with the directors and the alternates in the room, and instructed staff that the CAOs needed one briefing. We always encourage, if there's questions or issues, they can send those questions in. They can reach out. I'm available. I know I get told often, I get bad rap that I'm only available once a quarter or something, but I talk to many of the CAOs around the region quite frequently, but not all of them. So if there's questions, reach out. We can certainly help them with that. But to have a pre-consultation. This is the budget of the board. It goes to the finance committee, it'll go to the committee of the whole for the board to adopt. The fiduciary responsibility lies with the board members to make those decisions. And we see the CAOs in the advisory role for their members. And so with that in mind, I think there's ample opportunity for the CAOs to have input. But adding additional meetings just certainly draws down on staff time to be able to respond to the directors appropriately, and sometimes confuses the matter as well.
And with all those dates, our CAOs, other members of council, directors that are on those committees, we can all zoom in and listen to it. So actually, like, if we start in October, or sorry, August the 14th, we could zoom in and we could hear what's going on with the finance budget.
And we share all the documents with the communities.
Okay, any further questions?
None of them are Friday.
I'm not sure, are any of these a Friday?
Chances are.
No.
No.
No Fridays.
God bless you, Mary Kay, God bless you.
Note to self, next year, everything's on a Friday morning.
Okay, so your last one.
Okay, so there's a, upcoming meetings, for the CRSC for the month are June 10th, Community Development Committee. Economic Expansion on June 16th. Capital Region Resiliency Network is on June 19th, that's an extension of the Community Development Committee. Regional Infrastructure Committee in June 24th, and Planning Review and Adjustment Committee on June 24th. So if anyone ever needs to know the dates, reach out to Kelly, myself, or anyone, and we'll do that. We'll certainly share these, and as always, all the meetings are broadcast live to YouTube. And to ensure the transparency and accessibility, and directors are invited to attend any of interest, or even not to the committee. So anybody can attend virtually or watch virtually and reach out on that. Madam Chair, I will ask for your indulgence just on one other item. The last board meeting, and I think it was our infrastructure meeting, we missed a very important. We all wish a very important part of our team well and his new endeavors in retirement. But with that, there has been change within our organization. I'm just announcing it today, and then I'll be announcing it to staff later today. I'd like to congratulate and welcome Brett McCrae, who just spent an hour with during a tour of what's been really for the last 23 years, largely in part his direction and leadership down here getting us to this part, along with very many positive stakeholders and people with good input. Brett brings a lot to the table, and I would like to inform the board that Brett has accepted the position of COO, and I just hope that you'll join me today in welcoming him to that position. So hopefully you'll let the commissioner go in there.
I'm gonna multitask.
So, the Director Powell, as I've said in the past, our team all multitask, whether it's the team that you see here today, the folks back in the office, the people out here on the ground. Everybody in this organization has more than one job. I keep going back, I know I point her out often enough, but Port Kelly has at least 5 that I know of. I keep trying to pull them away and then she pops up with another. So anyway, that's the ability of the team. They're nimble, they're professional, and they're dedicated to you and to serving your communities and serving this region. Brett brings an incredible amount of capacity to the table. And he's still looking over this part of it with a whole lot of other responsibilities. So he's gonna be a very busy young man for the next while. I just, my more here is in how do I reduce his workload a little bit over the next while? So we're working through that now, but we'll have that sorted out. Everything will be done in short order. So just want to say thank you again, and just want to make sure that the board was informed first and foremost.
Thank you. Yes,
I want to ask one question. I know it didn't put it on the agenda, but is there such a thing as a not-for-profit charitable organization for the community? Like, if I wanted to set up a not-for-profit charitable organization that would start raising funds that build something for the community, is there such a thing?
Yeah, set it up, we have one bird.
Okay. Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
no further questions to hear through. I would just like to take this moment. When the packages come due, I'm always wondering like, how am I gonna get in there? How am I gonna, you know, and they'll always do a copy for me. Well, this last one, I got an email. I was working around the house and, Judy, I'm gonna be out in the area. Would you like me to bring your package? I said, oh, I wrote back, yes, I hope it's not too late. So Kelly, you're always thinking above and beyond, and I really appreciate that. And I appreciate all staff because they are very respectful. And I do have to say a shout out to Lonnie. He did something for a family member, not knowing it's my family, but he was doing his job. So every time if I'm at the office or I make a phone call, it's nothing but respect, like how can we help you? So I do appreciate that. So on that final note, I would ask for an adjournment,
Motion to adjourn, Dave Morrison.
second by,
Compound.
meeting's adjourned, thank you. I didn't have to use a hammer.
I know.